Most entrepreneurs don't have a strategy problem, they have a pattern problem, and they don't even know it. This is the Leadway Podcast, episode 215. And if you're hungry to build wealth, escape the W 2, and create a life on your own terms, but nobody around you is talking about how to actually do it, you're in the right place. My name is Chris Rickmall, and every week I sit down with investors and entrepreneurs who have already done it, breaking down the vehicles, the mindset, and the exact moves that built their wealth. Today, I've got Pat Smith on, who's a men's high performance coach and a founder of a nearly 800 member community called the Success Squad. Today, we're going to be talking about the mindset patterns that are quietly holding entrepreneurs back and why the words you use every day matter more than you think, and especially the science behind why top performers think completely different under pressure. So let's get into the interview. Pat Smith, welcome to the Leadway Podcast. Excited to get you on.
Thanks a ton, Chris. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to talk about mindset today. And we were talking a little bit before the podcast. I haven't, talked about this with an expert before. So we're going to be able to get into really like why somebody needs coaching. I think that's the biggest hurdle that anybody can kind of get into, when they're starting to look for coaching or what's that next step, and they need to start with mindset. But, for some people that can kind of sound fluffy. It's like, do I
Sure.
really need that? I just need to hustle more. But I'm excited to hear your take on that. But for those who are hearing your name for the first time, give us a little background on who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for allowing me to introduce myself. So I run a men's coaching business. So I primarily work with male business owners and entrepreneurs. I list myself as a men's high performance and mindset coach. And so really what brought me here was my own personal transformation and journey and getting into the personal development world, understanding how mindset plays such a big role, and then utilizing a lot of the tools that I learned in that journey and applying it to my corporate experience, which was, my past life, if you will. Worked for about 7 or 8 years in corporate sales, working for a few different multiple Fortune 1000 companies. And what I found throughout that whole journey was the individuals that were really, really great at what they do, professionally successful, and had a life that they were proud of outside of it, meaning they felt good physically, mentally, and emotionally. They were the ones that actually took this stuff serious and knew how to leverage this stuff to be better at work so they could be better for the people around them. And as I started to demonstrate some of that and do some of that for myself, I realized how much of a big difference it made in my life. And then over time, I realized it's like an eye-opening thing for me to realize how many other men are out there doing exactly what you just shared, which is just hustle harder, 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 thinking that eventually a certain dollar amount in the bank account, a certain house, a certain car will eventually lead them to this eternal level of happiness. And I, through my own journey, realized that is 100% not the case. Of course, that's my own belief. So that's really what's brought me here today. And I'm really fortunate to be able to share this work on podcasts like this, where there are high level individuals, high performing individuals. Specifically, you think about real estate right now with the way the market is and things being a little bit tighter. I was just texting with one of my friends, how are things going? Well, it's getting tough. You're having to get creative. And I think that's where the mindset piece is really, really where individuals can separate themselves from the rest of the pack. So long-winded answer, but that's a little bit about me, what brought me here as well.
Yeah, I love it because, me being specifically in the real estate market, that's what I
Mm-hmm.
hear right now. But
Yeah.
you talk to one person and it's one story. Hey, the market's great. Houses are moving. And the other one, market's
Mm-hmm.
terrible. It's rough. And those are usually the people that don't have as many clients. But
Sure.
I loved what you said about the high performers, because I
Mm-hmm.
think some of these people are trying to out earn their problems. But
Mm-hmm.
the problem doesn't change, it just looks different at those
Sure.
different levels. So being able to, have that mindset, be able to work through problems, it's on every single level. So Pat, your story in the beginning, how did you go down this road to where, you found that you wanted to be a mindset coach and, go through this growth and transformation you talked about?
Yeah, well, the first thing was around 2016. I had some kind of like a tragic event where my cousin passed away. I was living here in Charlotte at the time, and I started to go back to my old habits, which any between 14 and 23, I was doing all the stupid stuff you can imagine, drinking all the time, smoking all the time, taking a bunch of drugs and pills, just being basically escaping all of my emotions, didn't really even realize it. Then when it came all crashing down in 2016, I was forced to really face myself. Is the direction I want to go back to all of those things and outsourcing all of my emotions and happiness to something outside of me? Or do I want to take a new direction and actually get myself well? And for the longest time, I'd always been physically healthy. But at that moment, I really got to ask myself and sit with a little bit of reflection when I lost someone so close to me at such a young age, only a year apart from me. So I was 23. I think he was 24 at the time. It was my cousin. And I asked myself, am I actually like mentally well? And that was not the case. And so, I started to go down my own journey of, self-discovery, like what actually helps people who are dealing with anxiety or who are struggling with depression or who are learning how to have to let go of an old lifestyle, which was what I did for almost a decade, and potentially transform into something new and actually grow up. And the first thing that it led me to was meditation. And I know you and I spoke briefly before this.
Yeah.
Meditation really helped me just calm the nervous system down in a way that I had never experienced before. Now, did it happen in the first few times? No, it was actually harder than I thought it would be, even for a few minutes. But again, like anything that progressed, finally, over time, as I started to get more what I would consider mentally and emotionally healthy, and I often also refer to it as like getting your mental and emotional fitness in order. Many guys, right? We work out, we get our physical fitness, but how many guys are working on their mental and emotional fitness? When I started to incorporate those two things plus the physical fitness, my ability to show up in the workplace, which is what so many guys are all about. And trust me, yeah, I want to build my business and I am building my business, but I realized that could be the small delineation, the separating factor for me to being the average person who just clocks in, goes to the gym, goes through their normal lifestyle versus the person that actually can take care of their mental and emotional fitness. So when they are in that same sales meeting against one other competitor, who has the natural edge? And I started to really pick up on that. And I noticed that in my last sales job, when I took the territory that I was in that was doing about $500,000 a year in annual sales to nearly $20 million when I left per year. And I was asking myself, what was the difference between myself and the other guys in that position? They had more experience. They had been with the company longer. They were older than me, and they had been in that industry, like some of them for nearly the same amount I was alive. And sure, I could have had more energy than them, but the true difference was how was I able to hold up with the level of pressure that we were put under? How was I able to connect with individuals because I actually had a certain level of emotional intelligence to get to know someone, especially when you think about sales, a lot of psychology portion of it. And when I noticed that that was such a big gap, I realized there was an opportunity for me to use my experiences, the expertise that I went through, some further education to then provide that to other entrepreneurs, high performers, real estate agents, doesn't really matter the industry, to leverage their mindset and help them perform at a very high level. So it was that whole transition that finally allowed for me to show up now doing what I do now full time nearly for 4 years.
Yeah, and going from that sales job, what was it just kind of like that slow transition to where it's like, hey, maybe I want to do this for myself, or was there like like a moment where you're like, all right, I have to do something else other than be in the sales job?
Sure. Well, it was a mix of both actually, and thanks for asking. The first one was I left Indiana. I'm from Indiana. I'm Midwest guy. Left Indiana 2016, moved to Charlotte. Cousin passed away. I didn't know what to do. I had no one down here, only him. So I moved back to Indiana, and I thought I was getting this new lease on life, going down to this new chapter, and then it kind of got closed on. So I came back to Indiana, was working this job, and I started to. After about a couple years, I realized to myself, I cannot see myself living in my hometown for the rest of my life. And two, I also don't see myself living this job just for the money, even though it doesn't excite me at all. So in 2018, I started to reflect back what is actually of interest to me. And so I went back while I was working full time to get a holistic nutrition degree. That was my first thought, was I want to actually teach people, because I was always physical fitness and I was always into understanding how the nutrition plays a role in building muscle and being more sharp mentally and all of this stuff. So in 2018, I had the idea that eventually at some point I'm going to quit whatever job I'm in and I'm going to go all in on the coaching business. Now, at first, it was nutrition. I started to do that on the side for a little while. And then I realized what the truth of the matter was is yes, I might have been a nutrition coach. Like if I was coaching Chris on nutrition, yes, he wants to eat better, but really all I'm teaching him is behavior change. And behavior change starts up here. And then it started to click for me. And so in 2020, after I finished my certification through the nutrition, I started coaching for a little bit. But then I finally, around 2021, made the transition to mindset coaching. But then it was from 20, it was basically from thinking about this idea at 2018 all the way to 2022 when I was at this 7-day long Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat that I had been conjuring up this idea, building up the confidence to actually take the leap and go all in on something after having known only working a job for someone else. So it was a long like build up period, but then there was one instant moment where I was at this meditation retreat, and I've shared this before, I believe, on a couple other podcasts as well, is that when you get deep into meditation, you can start to really like get clarity on things, and you start to get different perspectives, different realizations. And the one thing that came to me in this meditation was it was like a voice almost, and it basically said, what makes you think that you can be this successful building someone else's dream that you wouldn't be able to be equally or more successful building your own dream? And I was like, holy cow, like, yes, of course, if I have enough passion to build someone else's and I do great at it, why would I not have that same or more passion and be even more successful on my own terms? And that was the changing factor, because within about an hour of that, I called in and put my 2 weeks notice in.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
such a crazy story.
Yeah.
Because from the meditation side and really being able to slow it down, and we talked a
Mm-hmm.
little bit before about kind of like where I'm at right now,
Sure.
and that's something I've implemented over the past couple weeks, and it's been a game changer. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, mood, energy, 100% difference. And I think some people it can come off as like a little woo woo, but talking about your experience to where, I mean, that, you hear like those whispers in your head, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like that's the game changer. Everything got quiet and you were able to get really clear. So, I kind of want to fast forward in the journey. So now you're
Mm-hmm.
coaching your own clients, and, you have some different methods on how you do that. But, if I would say step one, who is the person that is looking for coaching that comes to you?
So there's really two parts, and I believe the misconception that a lot of people fall into is they need to be completely down bad, like struggling so bad to come to get a coach. And really, what I see is that can happen. However, I say about 80% of the guys that come to me, they actually have some great things already in the works. They're just wanting to figure out how can I fine tune specific things. So really, what guys typically come to me having already been relatively successful in business owners, entrepreneurs, or at least having some level of success in where they're at, and they realize that, hey, certain patterns that I'm experiencing, certain self-sabotaging thoughts that I have come up so frequently are draining me to the point where they're not allowing for me to be as present as I would like at work, at home. I'm not able to be as focused, and I start to feel a little bit of anxiety or pressure from these things, and it's taking me from really reaching my full potential. So for me, I really like to work with people that are already with some momentum and movement, so that we can then create a little bit more of like a hockey stick style curve. Because once some of these things get cleared out, specifically certain beliefs, certain patterns, and like changing of identity, there are some crazy things that I've seen happen, not just for me personally, but obviously with other clients as well. So it can go one of two ways. Like I said, people can be really struggling, and that's obviously a way where I can definitely help them, because there can be some quick, easy wins to really grasp onto and build up some of that in terms of mindset, versus individuals who already have a lot going on.
That makes sense. Because, working with those people who already kind of have something going and there's just kind of like that little tweak that they need to do versus somebody who, is maybe at the bottom. Like, what does it depend on each person, or how are you working with each person to be able to uncover what's really going on and help them, move to that next level?
Yeah, great question. For me, if I'm working with someone one on one, it's highly personalized. And I take, for the most part, I take a 4-step approach and I call it the 4 R's. So, first is reveal. Let's uncover like what's unconscious to you. Let's release it. Let it go. Let's rewire the brain. If you think about meditation, it's a lot of what we're doing there. Let's like rebuild it, or sorry, rewire the inner work. And then let's last one, fourth one, rebuild. Let's curate the lifestyle around it so it supports that, so you don't fall back into the old habits. So for instance, right, I'll just use an example. If you build up all of these clean eating habits, but you haven't changed anything in your environment, and your significant other always wants to go to Taco Bell, and all you have in your house is snack food, and you're always on the go, and you always choose, fast food, the environment is not going to help you. So it's reveal, release, rewire, rebuild. And based on where the individual is at, how much work they've previously done in certain capacities would determine how much time we spend in each one of those really sections. And it's highly personalized because every single person is different. And the interesting thing becomes, right, we go through release or reveal, release, rewire, rebuild, and then we get to this new stage of life, and then we got to relearn something new all over again. And it becomes this constant cycle, which is why, I've worked with some of my clients for over 2+ years, and it's not because they're not getting results, in my opinion, and from what they've shared, it's just they're emerging into new seasons of the life, which require new beliefs, different changes in themselves, and that type of stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's super, super interesting because,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm trying to think of how to word this because I've seen so many people, they're just kind of going and they're
Mm-hmm.
doing, and I've seen them not really ask for help and really get clear on that next level. And then I hear from, the people I listen to on podcasts who went and got the coaching, and then they, 10x and hockey sticks.
Mm-hmm.
So, step one for those people, it's like they come to you and then you're sitting them down, focusing on the one-on-one. You kind of described it there. Are those 4 steps pretty much the way that it's kind of like the conveyor belt? If they're struggling with one thing, you can kind of point to the one spot on the conveyor belt, or is it just kind of you have to kind of start over every single time with each new, lesson and problem?
Yeah. So I would say from my experience that they're always going to start on the reveal. We have to bring, I mean, that's really what my job as a coach is. And even with my coach, like I have a coach too. Yes, I've hired multiple coaches and I still work with the coach. And the truth of the matter is, I've trained my brain right now currently to only see the things that I can see. And I've done so enough times. That's why the reveal stage is so important, I believe, for a coach to be able to help point out the blind spots of their clients, is that's one of the most important pieces, because you're only going to see things one way. And if you only see things one way, you're only going to be able to get one type of result. And an outsider's view, which is the reveal process, is instead of saying, oh, we need to start rewiring, that's building on a shaky foundation. So my first initial thought with everyone is we need to reveal what the foundation is currently made of, like your mindset, your beliefs, your patterns, your identity. First, we may have to release, let go of certain things, but that's where it becomes hyper personalized. And what I mean by that is, for some people, they might already have a really, really strong foundation because they're very emotionally intelligent. They have a good core sense of their values and their beliefs, and they've already up leveled or they've done some sort of work. Whereas another individual may be way far on the other end of the spectrum. And what I mean by that is they may spend a lot more time uncovering and digging in to certain beliefs and patterns. So to me, it's everyone is starting on that reveal stage, no matter what. It just depends on how long they're there. And then when you go back through that, I guess, conveyor belt, if you were to put it that way, becomes shorter, because the rewiring and rebuilding process, they've already built such a strong foundation that they may only just need to tweak a couple small things versus an entire, basically I like to put, I always put it in the podcast person's term. It's not a full down, tear down, and then
Mhm.
rebuild, right? It's literally just like a little small renovation. Like I just need to put some new carpet. I need to tear up the carpet and put carpet in. But that's how it becomes the fine tuned tweaking. So those are like the two different variations that I would see.
And going back through, like my research, y- so you're certified in Dr. Joe Dispenza's neuro change solutions method and then
Mm-hmm.
the enlifted method. So based on what you've kind of, discussed, are those the methods you're using with these clients? And, just for simple terms, like what do these mean?
Sure. No. Yeah, appreciate you asking. So yeah, these are where I got most of my formal education in utilizing this work plus my own personal experience. And so yeah, these main like the curriculum that was associated with Dr. Joe Dispenza and the Neuro Change Solutions group, which is a separate corporate training group that he has created to bring in understanding how to basically leverage emotional regulation and mindset and utilizing and optimizing your brainwave patterns to be essentially be in flow more often than being in survival mode. So I use that curriculum that I've
Mhm.
taught under and had taught under for almost 4 years, and plus the enlifted method. And the enlifted method is more focused on solely on mindset and talking specifically how the stories that we tell ourselves, all of our past experiences, the meanings that we have behind each one of those experiences shape the way we look at life, as well as the language patterns that we use on a daily basis that over time build up like building blocks that create the mindset that we live in. And your example earlier was great, right? How many times you go to talk to real estate agents and they're like, yeah, market's tough. Things are tied out here. Kind of sucks. Okay, but Chris, if they said that to you, they have most likely said that to 10 other people in the past week. And now they are literally training their mind to look for more ways of that versus the guy who said, no, things are great. And hey, it doesn't mean that things are always great. It's also things are a little bit tight and we're getting creative. Two totally different things.
Mhm.
And so the enlifted process is more of the low hanging fruit application part of the language piece that you and I can change today if we wanted, plus the deeper story work. And then the Dr. Joe Dispenza stuff is more, I would say, on the science back stuff of understanding how our physiology, how our brain waves, how our nervous system interact based on the mindset that we're living in. So I've been fortunate enough to learn from both and then merge the two to really create my own unique mechanism, if you will, to share with clients, to share with guys in my online community, in my 31-day challenges, and all of those different modalities that I use.
Yeah, and I want to touch back on the mindset part because you hear a lot of people, talk about manifesting this end result. And that's, between me and my wife, we talk about this too because we're like, hey, are we manifesting money and these experiences that we're going to have? But, diving into, what is the actual science of manifesting, and because a lot of this, like you said, happens during the meditation when all this clarity comes. So, what's the
Mm-hmm.
difference between, the meditation and the manifesting, and how do all of those come together to where some people, they think about this, they write it down on paper, and it comes true, like a vivid vision,
Mm-hmm.
versus some people who, they say it and things don't come true?
Mm-hmm.
Does
Well,
that
so
kind of make
yeah,
sense?
no, yeah, great question. And so a couple things on just in terms of the science background. First and foremost, we need to realize that our brain, and there's studies that have shown this, that our brain does not know the difference between a real lived experience and an experience like a vision that you create through thought alone. If you were in enough of a theta brainwave state, which is basically a very hypnotic state, which we can put ourselves into a self hypnotic state simply by meditating, because we slow the brainwaves down enough to where our brain basically gets confused and not understanding whether we've actually lived that experience and whether we haven't lived that experience and it's just a vision. And so, because it doesn't know the difference, if I can be in meditation long enough and slow my brain waves down long enough, I can start to create essentially neural pathways to think that I have experienced this already. And to your mind, it's like you've living in the future without ever being there. And so I like to put it in an example, super easy to understand. If I go in and I visualize this huge meeting with a client that may close me $1 million, and I go in there and I meditated on that and I start to envision what it feels like to be in that room, the initial pressure, what the room might seem like, see, smell, what I might still be tasting, what am I hearing? You put your body into that state of understanding that, and you do that for 5 to 10 times versus the person that goes into it blind. Because your brain doesn't know the difference, you have basically given yourself 5 to 10 practice rounds. Now, my question to you, Chris, if that's the case, who is going to have the higher likelihood of crushing that meeting?
Easily to someone who practiced.
Right. So that's the first thing that we need to understand when it comes to understanding meditation. And then the manifestation portion of that is the person who just writes it down and just says it out loud but doesn't believe it. Their nervous system doesn't feel safe with it. And so how could something ever be received if I'm blocking it off? The other person that reads it, that believes it, but isn't trying to force it, their nervous system is calm, associated with that $1 million deal, and they can actually see things, they can see opportunities that way. First, with I'm in a nervous system of survival mode, I'm just ready to run, fight, or flight, right? So those are the two biggest things that I would say are difference. The other thing I'll share is when it comes to manifestation in all of these different terms, is we can think about it, but that's just one piece of the pie. We have to also be able to feel it. So thoughts and feelings, it's like it needs to be congruent in that way. And so Dr. Joe Dispenza a lot of times will often say matching an intention with your emotion. The intention is I want to build a business this big, and I also need to live in the emotional state that would align me with that. When you live there enough times, you're training your mind to see opportunities that you wouldn't see if you were living in a state of lack versus actually being there. So that's how I would differentiate it, at least in the most simple terms that I can.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense because yeah, I listen to Brian Lubin a lot, and that's what he talks
Okay.
about. He does the Vivid Vision by Cameron
Sure.
Herold, and that's something, me and my wife have done, and I've done it personally, and we're kind of like
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of that. So
For sure.
it's like, okay, well, we have this end vision, and then we kind of backtrack on how to get there, but vision is nothing without the action. So it's kind of like,
Sure.
how do you balance each one? And if you're putting in the work. So it's, yeah, just an interesting way to kind of
Mm-hmm.
break that down. Cause like I've always wondered, I bring on
Yeah,
real estate investors who do this, but not like the science behind it. So
for
yeah,
sure.
super
Yeah,
interesting.
you shared a great point, and it's a little tagline that one or a little line that one of my coaches told me a while back. He said, "You can't have the woo without the do." I can't just meditate here in my office and hope that my business makes $1 million. I can meditate on it to give myself a leg up, and then I have to go actually put in the action, and that's where I think it's super important. And one thing that people talk about is like you have to change your beliefs in order to know that that's true. And they say, well, how do I change my beliefs? And to me, it's just about making a different decision. In that sense, is if my belief is that money or the market is tight or it's lacking and there's not enough for me out there, if I make a decision to tell Chris that same thing, then I'm continuing to enroll myself in that. If I say it's market's tight and I make a decision to get creative on who else could I go to, who haven't I talked to, et cetera, I am actually beginning to shift that belief because I'm taking opposing action to what is standing true for me. So people often get caught up in the idea of, oh, well, I don't know how to change my beliefs. Start making some different decisions. You believe that you're struggling, do something to show yourself you can't, or do some research to realize that, man, money's tight out there. No, there's more money in circulation now than ever. There's two totally different mindsets, and it's based off how you look at it and making a decision to take it one step further. And that's one of the biggest things that I like to say is like, get curious, stay curious longer. Right? Oh, market's tight. And I got my buddy, he's a real estate, he's a real estate agent here in Charlotte, one of my clients. Yeah, it's market's tight. And what else? You're right. There's still events going on every single week. There's still podcasts that you could be on, right? There's other things out there that you have to get creative for, but from a limited state of mind, you're not going to be thinking about that thing. But from a growth mindset, you are going to be actively looking out there. So that's a little 2 cents, at least in
Yeah.
my idea in terms of the fixed versus growth mindset.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing I see between like successful people and somebody who,
Mm.
struggled and went back to a W-2 job. It's, hey, look, like we're in the grind. We got through it because we believed we would be able to get through it. And somebody took the
Mm-hmm.
victim mindset. Oh, we got screwed and we ended up back in a W-2. So being
Mm-hmm.
in the growth mindset, like you're kind of talking about, how are you viewing those situations? Love it. Love it. So,
Yeah.
I want to go back to, how you coach clients a little bit, and, what kind of common patterns are you seeing in the entrepreneurs that you're coaching?
Mm-hmm. Well, first and foremost, you hear a lot of people talk specifically around time is a struggle. They feel lots of overwhelm. They can feel anxious about it. They can be very, very attached to an outcome. So I'll just address those. Those are some few patterns that I'll see. So first one, time. Time is there's never enough time. Totally get that. But my question is, how much time up front, investing up front, are you putting in for yourself to be as focused and as present as possible for the moments that matter? And that's why I believe things like meditation, teaching yourself to be able to be calm in high pressure situations, teaching yourself how to slow down so you can actually comprehend things at a high level are super important. Because if you and I have the same 24 hours, but I'm way more focused, I can live less reactive, right? When I get thrown a curveball in my life, I'm not out for 3 days pissing and moaning about it. I can throw a little bit of a fit for the first 5 or 10 minutes, and then I move on. So those are a couple patterns first and foremost that if you can just do those, the lowest hanging fruit, imagine how much time you get back if you're not spent wound up worried about some deal that didn't close a week ago. What deal is worth a week of your time? So those are some certain patterns that people don't put two and two together. Right? You'll get on the call, hey, what's going on? Well, this freaking deal didn't close 2 weeks ago. Okay, so you're telling me that something 2 weeks ago is still impacting you today. What does that tell us about your emotional intelligence and your ability to let go? So that's one pattern. The other one that comes to mind, of course, is just being present and being focused. That also has to do with the whole meditation piece. And then the other one is primarily around um, having to detach from the outcome so much so that they what I would consider blocking themselves from their blessings. And what I mean by that is just imagine that you are so attached to hitting a certain revenue goal. And you become so attached to hitting that revenue goal that now you aren't there. So every moment that you're not there and you're here, what do you think that person is feeling, Chris?
Exactly. They're going to feel rough.
They're going to feel rough. They could feel anxious. They could feel overwhelmed. They could feel pressure. And if you're trying to get to that point, if I'm living anxiously from pressure, from a level of overwhelm all the time, when I go to ask a client in this pitch or whatever the case is to do business with me, we can feel that. Other individuals can feel that. They don't even need to know it, but they can feel it, and their guard goes up, which makes it even harder for them to get to that goal. So when we can detach from the outcome, we change our emotional state, we change the way that we think, and then from there, they have the ability to actually move on what they want to do. So those are a couple patterns that I definitely see. Specifically, like you said, just getting them to understand that it's very easy to go back into a victim mindset. And if they're there it's going to be very difficult for them to take ownership to step out of that.
So yeah, that's a lot to chew on right there because
Mm-hmm.
like I love the book Extreme Ownership, and it talks about
Yeah.
being in the victim mindset versus,
Yeah.
taking the ownership, how much of um you know, say something bad happens in one of their
Mm-hmm.
meetings or with a deal, how are you working through with those entrepreneurs to say, "Hey, is this something that happened to you?" or taking the ownership?
Um, can you rephrase it? Just say
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah, that probably
or
wasn't
even
clear.
restate it would be good. You're
Ye-
okay.
Yeah, understanding how in some way they need to take ownership of why that thing went wrong and understand
Mm-hmm.
it and to be able to move on from it versus, hey, this thing happened to me. I don't know what happened and being the victim to it. So how do you help
Yeah,
somebody work through that situation to be able to move on from it? Is it taking the ownership or
sure.
understanding that, a shitty thing happened?
A mix of both. And one thing that I found and through the enlifted method, which is amazing, is you can get to know where someone lies in terms of their mindset just by the way that they talk. And so if you ask somebody, hey, what happened? Well, this deal went wrong. They they didn't get it on time, and now I'm feeling XYZ because of them. Okay, so that's one of the first ways that if we actually wrote down exactly what they just said, what they say, we can realize that they're using what we call projection language. He, she, they, them. The moment that they say, Chris make me feel X, all there's really saying is that Chris or that they are outsourcing their agency to feel a certain way to Chris. And unfortunately, they can't change Chris. And if they can't change Chris, they become at the mercy of Chris. And now that becomes their whole life. And so it's important for them to pull that out. And instead of saying, Chris makes me feel this way, cross that out. I make me feel this way, puts them back in ownership. I get to choose how I make myself feel. Things are going to happen, Chris. We know that
Mhm.
life changes, life, things go
Oh,
on,
oh yeah.
shit hits the fan. We've been there. And it's not to say we're never supposed to feel angry. We're never, no. Let's put that off the side. We're humans. We're going to feel all the arrays of, like the different variations of emotion as we should as humans. The question is, how long are you going to stay there? So when
Mhm.
you think about the victim mentality, you can start to help them pluck apart and give them just a very small thing. Hey, for the next week, I want you to be conscious and aware of how much projection language are you using. And if you changed out the he, she, they, them, it, a specific thing, you know, I-77 always makes me late. Okay. I'm calling BS. I always make me late because I don't plan for it. It's very different. And so it's just getting to understand that and see that. That is some very easy, low hanging fruit that if anybody was listening or watching this could start to pluck out for themselves, which would change their mindset very quickly from the victim mindset to a more of an ownership style mindset. So what we talk about is conflicting language or conflicting language versus architect language. One is tearing you down and one is building you up. So those are really like easy, low hanging fruit that if people wanted to really implement this and see how that plays out, that's one things that I will share with clients very early on and get them to start getting into that pattern rhythm of becoming aware for themselves.
Yeah, that answers one of my later questions. Is kind of like
Mm-hmm.
who what's something that somebody could take away from this podcast and do like today? What's like a small
Mm-hmm.
exercise that they can put themselves through? I think that's a great one right there. Are there any other
Mm-hmm.
um, small things that somebody could do that I know they're freebies. They should sign up for your coaching first. But is there
Yeah.
any small tweaks that somebody can do throughout their day to start being more self-aware?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that word you just used, self-awareness or just awareness in general, is the first step. If I'm not aware of it, I'm very likely never going to change it. So becoming aware of it. So a couple of the things I talked about the projection language. A couple other ones would be we've heard this before. How many times do you hear people say, "Oh, I should start going to the gym"? I could start going to the gym. I don't start going to the gym. And every time they do that, It's building a level of, or lack thereof, self-trust and confidence. People say they need more discipline. The truth is, your words say it all. I should go do this, and I don't go do this. Now I'm telling myself that anything that I say doesn't really matter. So you could do what we would consider a should detox, 7 days of how often do you should on yourself, and like how in what could you change that? Should goes to could goes to can goes to can because. And when you do that, you will start to see that there is an emotional shift if you were to say that out loud. And really, anyone could write this down, right? It's like you could put down, I should do more deals. And if you were to say that back, if you were to say, I should do more deals, share that with me, Chris, if you don't mind.
As hold on,
Yeah,
walk me through.
I should do more deals.
I should do more deals.
What's the initial energy or vibe you share or you feel saying that?
I feel probably more energized or put down. I feel
Okay.
put down because I feel like I'm not there.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Now, if you were to say, and we're going to skip ahead a little bit, I can do more deals. How would that sound?
I can
Try
do
that
more
on.
deals. I feel more energized.
Exactly. So our words, right? Our words are just little clues for our mind to change our emotional state. So if you notice yourself in the should all the time, no wonder you feel damper down and disempowered and not really excited to go after it. Or you feel a level of pressure. And if I'm constantly being pressured to do something, I'm not very interested in doing it after a while. First, I can do these things. So that's one. The other one that I would encourage individuals to pay attention to is in order to create certainty, to create clarity, watch their language patterns. And we call this soft talk language. Kinda, probably, sorta, I'll try, I guess, maybe. It's like imagine going up and asking a girl on a date. Not that I do that. I got a fiance, and just imagine, hey, I'm curious if you kind of want to go get a bite to eat sometime, possibly. What's the response going to be? Well, first, I'm confused. And two, do you really want to or do you not want to? And into my mind, I'm already creating a level of ambiguity or uncertainty. And so when people say they want clarity, they want certainty, they want confidence, check your language patterns. How much soft talk are you using? Even if you say, yeah, I'll try and get that done for you today. Are you going to do it or are you going to not? And it's okay to say, I don't have capacity for that today. Cool. I respect that way more than someone saying I try to do that. And it depletes your confidence every time you do that. Depletes the mindset. And the mindset from that soft talk language creates a level of, like I said, uncertainty. And then imagine when you go into a deal or something along those lines and you're utilizing all that soft talk language, you don't make the person feel very sure to work with you. Yeah, I think we can kind of work around that rate or whatever it is. And I guess I'll be able to get a little bit of closing money for you. You guess a
Yeah.
little bit. It's like, hold on, we need to know that. So that would be a couple things. Should, and then soft talk, which is like, you know, probably, try, guess, maybe, kind of, sort of, one day, and then creating and removing those and notice what that sounds like. I'll try and get that done tonight. I'll get that done tonight. Totally different. And in doing so, it starts to train their mind simply by doing something that's free. It takes very little time than what they're already doing. You're already talking with someone, and it actually is training your brain in a way that most people have never even thought of. So those would be two low hanging fruits that if people just did that for a month, I can almost guarantee that they would experience a level of shift in their mental and emotional state.
Ah, I love it. I love it. So, going, getting close to wrapping up the show here. If someone's, not ready for coaching, financially or otherwise, like, you know, w you're talking about the things that you're doing
Mhm.
or the two examples we just talked about, those are two very easy steps to be able to, start becoming self-aware and really changing the mindset. But Pat, like what are you working on now that what's coming up for you that you're excited about?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I would say the two biggest things that have been super exciting for me is because I know, and this is sometimes selfishly for me, because I know so many of the guys in my network are constantly looking for connection. They're looking to build alongside other high performers, business owners, entrepreneurs. I've started an online community through the platform School where we have nearly 800 members, and they're all focused on building a life that's not just a rich one, but I would consider a fulfilled one, meaning they are very professional successfully. They can be present with the people that matter most to them, and they have their physical, mental, and emotional health in order. And so that's a fully free community. So if people just wanted to get a taste of what's it like to be in a network, in a brotherhood of other guys surrounded by them, going after similar things, they could obviously join that, which is free, no cost. The other thing that within that, there's a subset of guys in that I take through specific challenges. Now, this is specifically to get them in motion of feeling what it feels like to execute on a daily basis. So we incorporate a physical challenge and a mindset or a character building challenge every single day. Very small things that typically take less than 10 minutes. And then there's a small group that we go through that. And we do that every month. The next one, not sure when the podcast will be launching, but the next one will be taking place mid-June. That's very low cost to entry, around $99. And I do a full money back guarantee. If you truly can tell me that you gave it your all, which I'll be able to see in how active you are in the challenge, and you don't feel like you've grown in some way, I will 100% refund your money back, no questions asked. So those are two ways that I like to just give back in a way that saying, hey, here's everything that I can support you with without actually coaching you one-on-one for you to get in motion and feel what it feels like to actually get some of this stuff rolling. So those would be the two biggest things that I would share.
I'll make sure to get that link if you share it with me, and I'll
Sure.
put it in the podcast description for those that are interested. But Pat, where's another place if somebody wants to get connected to you, follow you, and or get connected? What's the best place to go?
Yeah, so my biggest platform that I use the most is on Instagram. So it's Pat Smith Wellness, PATSMITH Wellness, all one word. And so that's where I post the most. Outside of that, I am on LinkedIn, but I would say Instagram is the primary platform that I utilize.
Amazing. Amazing. Pat, this has been awesome. It's been super eye-opening. I've been wanting to get somebody to talk about mindset on here for a while. So, I'm glad you were able to come on and really break that down because that's something that I'm kind of going through as well right now. So lots of really good information. So I'll make sure to link all of Pat's information in the show notes below. But as for this episode, this has been Chris and Pat on the Leadway Podcast.